challenger was a 9-foot tall giant named Goliath, who looked to be the favourite in the battle. But God chose David, a simple shepherd boy, to fight against Goliath. With God's help, David could experience victory over the giant in his path. The enemy was defeated. But what does that look like? How to respond well to victory? Who gets the glory for it? And through this story's conclusion, we can see David's posture on display. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andy, and I'm the pastor here at Community Church Longton. Hey, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up down below. Join with me as I share with you the right response to victory and how you can walk into victory in your own life. This is the last in the series, 5 Smooth Stones. I've been going through this well-known story of David and Goliath, which I hope has encouraged you. With God's help, David was able to celebrate the battle over the giant in his way. The battle required focus solely on God. And finally today, we get to celebrate. Do you remember the Lionesses winning the Women's Euro 2022 Championship by defeating Germany 2-1 in that intense Wembley final last year? I was thrilled watching their victory, and I'm not a big football fan. Thinking back on it now, I remember how important it is to celebrate victories in our life, even more so spiritually. You see, God has provided all that we need. And one of the things he's given us is memories of the testimony of his provision and goodness to us. If you're like me, your memory may not be quite as good as it used to be. If that's the case, I recommend writing it down. Get yourself a notebook and write it down, or you can do it digitally if that's what you're doing. And remember all the amazing things God has done for you. As we remember him, we honour and glorify him in the victory that he's given us. But what was the response to this victory that happened? I'm not just talking about the response of David and the Israelite army, but I'm also going to talk about the response of the enemy. The first thing I want us to see about victory is this. Victory sends the enemy running. In other videos, I've spoken about Goliath and the lessons that we can learn from him. I've spoken about how God has provided everything for David. But what about the opposing force? In verse 51 of 1 Samuel 17, it gives us a glimpse into the immediate response of the Philistines after the victory. It says this: David ran and stood over him. He took out the Philistine's sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him and cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Did you get that? They turned and ran. Because their champion is now dead, they lost hope. You see, if we put our hope and trust in any other person than Jesus Christ, we will eventually be let down by them. It's perfectly okay having trust in people and trusting people. However, if these people take the place of God in our lives, we will be let down. It's like what Jesus said in Matthew 6:21. He says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It appears from our story in 1 Samuel 17 that the Philistines placed great value in their champion Goliath. They considered him to be their treasure. He was going to win everything for them. He was going to defeat that one man, and the whole Israelite army would be theirs in slaves. See, without him, they were left in a state of confusion and uncertainty. The great news is that we have a personal and constant God who never changes or abandons us. Many of us need to be reminded of Paul's words in Romans 8:28. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. Now, it's great being loved by God and knowing his love, but if we're honest, we all tend to experience seasons where we don't know where God is. And we feel those times perhaps when we go, where are you, God? And when we pray, it feels like our prayers hit the ceiling and fall straight back down. I'm here to let you know from personal experience that God is still working and is working for your good and his glory. True victory, the kind ultimately won by God in your life, should not send you running. It shouldn't send me running, but it will send the enemy running. When we walk into victory, the enemy runs, he flees. And that's what happened in David's case in our story. He understands that when the enemy goes running, God deserves the glory. Victory gives God the glory. When God gets all the glory he deserves, because he's won the battle. Listen to 1 Samuel 17:52. It says, "Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout, and they pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron." Too often, because of our own egos, we try to take some of the glory for ourselves when the victory is won. Well, I know that you're here, God. I know that you're involved, but I did it. I sorted it all out. I know I needed help with my finances. I was struggling, but I got a good budget and sorted it all out. If the devil can't stop God from winning the victory in your life, he will try at least to distract you from praising God for it. This, once again, is why our focus must be on God. It's every moment that we need to be focused on him. It's so important. In Psalm 108, David asked, "Who will give us the victory?" Verse 12 to 13 reads, "Give us aid against the enemy, for human help is worthless. With God, we shall gain the victory, and he will trample down the enemies." David was confident and declared in this verse, "With God's help, we shall gain the victory." Do you believe that statement is still true today? With God, we shall gain the victory. That statement is true today as much as it was way back for David. We often, though, try and handle the problems ourselves without relying on God, thinking somehow we can manage, we can sort it out. However, David knew where his help come from. He said in Psalm 121, "I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my help come from?" It's like he's asking, does my help come from these majestic mountains? And he replies, "My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth." Because his help and his strength came from the Lord, that is who he and the Israelite army decided to give the credit to when the victory came. All the victories accomplished are rightly attributed to God, who deserves all the praise and honor for it. In conclusion to this wonderful story, there's one more aspect of post-victory behavior that I'd like to address, and we find it in verse 53 of 1 Samuel 17. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. Victory requires us to finish the job. See, the Israelite strategy against the Philistine to take the plunder is often overlooked. Opportunities for taking plunder arise at time of change, when one person takes something from another person. That's what plunder is. This can also serve as method for transition. See, David is anointed as future king. It marks a significant transition in Israel's history. Even before Saul, the current king, has died, David is now anointed king. It reminds me of another transition when the Hebrews were leaving Egypt. And they packed it all up on that night, and they had to put blood over the doors and all the rest. But they left and they plundered Egypt. They take the goods from Egypt with them. There was a transition. They were moving out of slavery into freedom. A transition, and they plundered so they could take that. I wonder what's been taken in your life. I wonder where you need to take things back. Maybe it's peace. Maybe you've been anxious and worried. Maybe it's sleep, and the lack of sleep has just made you feel really just can't cope. Maybe you've been unsettled and you've not been content with where you are or what's happening in your life. Jesus won the victory on the cross. And now it's time for us to go and plunder the enemy's camp where he's taken things from us. The Israelites didn't stop short. They finished the job. They plundered the camp. They overtook the enemy. Often, you see, we ask God for freedom. Father, will you do this in my life? Will you do this? Will you set me free from this certain situation in our life? And then we never step into it when it comes. We never walk into the victory. Jesus won the victory on the cross for you once and for all. Now it's for you to step into it. God opened opportunities for the Israelites to move into a new season of transition. But first, they had to finish the job that was in front of them. In our lives, we cannot afford to stop short either. It's easy to get things almost done. I've sorted most of my life out. I'm almost finished. Thankfully, Jesus did complete his mission, and with full confidence, he was able to say on the cross, "It is finished." David's dependency upon God continued throughout his life. There were a few exceptions, but was this dependency the secret behind the success of this king of Israel? Could David have accomplished all he did without God? Listen to what David said to the Philistine. He says, "You come against me with the sword, the spear, and the javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into our hands. All those gathered here will know that it's not by sword or spear the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you all into our hands." Look at David. He was full of confidence. The battle is the Lord's. He'd got everything he needed. He was just going to go and walk into the victory. Consider this line. All will know it's not by sword or spirit. It's not by might or by power. It's by your spirit. And the story of David and others through the Bible who are unlikely people accomplished extraordinary things. He does this. God does this. So there is no question who is responsible for the victory. He is the one. He's the one who gets the glory. Let me ask you, where do you need to experience victory in your life? Where do you need to take that step and walk into victory? Also, what areas have you been trying to manufacture the victory on your own? Where have you been struggling to make it through, to get through? If I just do this, if I just sort this out, it's going to be all right. When was the last time you asked the Lord to deliver you in the battle? Lord, will you do this for me? Will you set me free? And then it's time for you to walk into it. And as you walk into the victory that God has got for you, remember this. As you defeat the giant in front of you, there will always be another Goliath somewhere in your life. Remember that God has already done all that he had to do. He's given you all that you need to defeat this giant that's facing you and any other giant that comes before you. And finally, remember who you are. Remember who you are and remember who your God is. Your God is a mighty God who's able to save, not by sword, not by spear, but by his Spirit. Thank you for all that you've done for us. Thank you for the victory that you've given us that we can walk into. And we give you all the glory and honor and praise for that victory. Amen.